I'm Christine Ellis, MMO's General Director, and I'd love to take the time to walk you through some practical pointers for one of the most intimidating parts of serving overseas, functioning well in another culture. I lived and worked in another culture for over 6 years as a missionary in Central America, and I've had the privilege of serving in many different cultures around the world in my role as one of the team leaders at MMO. Becoming culturally agile is something I value greatly, but this doesn't mean I'm trying to become an expert in every other culture. That's a fairly impossible task. But what that means is I want to know how to interact with people based upon their cultural context. To become more effective in unfamiliar settings, to communicate well, and most importantly, not to cloud the message of the gospel by offending or fumbling through interactions. And as I've been working on growing in this area, I'd love to share some wisdom I've gained from others who know far more than I do about working cross-culturally. Number one, have a learner's spirit. I come into other cultures with preconceived notions, assumptions, and a frame of reference that's unique to my own culture. In order to learn and grow from this new culture, I need to be aware of my own frame of reference and decide to be open-minded when learning about another's. I can research before the trip to find out as much of the culture as I can before departure. History, geography, religion, language, all of these play important roles in developing a culture. Learning about these will help you to be more informed and better understand what you're observing. I need to watch my settings. Am I, as an American, more loud and boisterous in public than those around me? I need to avoid implying that my way is superior or more informed, that others need to be more like me. Withholding judgment, becoming a patient listener, and asking non-threatening, non-judgmental questions are all great ways to acknowledge that learning a culture is not a quick process, and we are in an environment that we have no frame of reference for. About a year ago, I took my first trip to South Africa with a team of about 20. It was a great trip, and we were able to help a lot of people. But there was one aspect of clinic that was a challenge for our providers throughout the week. Our patients did not seem grateful at all. We often become accustomed to hugs and smiles and expressions of delight at the end of the process, but here we found that patients reacted differently. They often expressed displeasure with their eyeglasses, wanting another color frame, or even when our team had worked hard to fit them, and even though they desperately needed these glasses and had waited all night. They lacked resources to purchase any themselves, so it was hard to understand why they did not seem thankful for the help. At the end of the trip, we had a long layover in Johannesburg before returning home, so I'd asked the group if anyone would like to accompany me to the Apartheid Museum. Here we were handed tickets marked whites or non-whites and instructed to enter through separate doors depending on our ticket's listed classification. Over the next couple of hours, we got a crash course in South African history with specific examples from the lives of people who had very different experiences. Much of this was very recent history. It was still fresh in the minds of our patients in the townships where we had been working outside Port Elizabeth all week. One of the nurses on the team came up to me in the museum, and she had tears in her eyes, and she said, "I needed to see this." Just this little bit of exposure to a culture we were visiting gave us a better understanding of the challenges we faced, the underlying tensions that we did not initially comprehend. Having a learner's spirit is invaluable when visiting another culture and will help us to adapt our focus and our emotions when we encounter challenges along the way. Number two, we need to focus on commonalities rather than differences. Our eyes are immediately drawn to differences rather than commonalities. That's human nature. But relationships are built on commonalities. As we learn about the differences, we should be careful not to fixate upon those. Rather, we look for what we have in common, focus on that, but learn about differences along the way. I moved to Honduras in 2005. I spoke Spanish, but I struggled often to make personal connections in a culture that was very different from my own. People were kind and warm and welcoming, but clearly I was an outsider. The single event that changed that the most for me was when I learned that Robbie and I were expecting our first child. My newfound Honduran friends were eager to tell me their own stories, and we found common ground in the shared experience of becoming mothers. As time went on and I learned more and more about Honduran culture, there was a common practice that continued to mystify me. It was fairly common for babies to not receive their name until they were about a month old. I would visit the family after the baby's birth, and they would simply refer to the new one as the baby or he or she. And this felt really strange to me. In my mind, they had 9 months to figure out a name. Why did they wait? What was the hesitation? They would often even ask me when I was there for name ideas during the visit, and I couldn't understand why it had taken them so long to try to come up with this. To me, this wait to name a child felt cold and almost unloving even. But not wanting to offend, I never asked why. After time, one of my closest Honduran friends asked me a question out of the blue. Christine, we all have a hard time understanding how, in American culture, you choose the baby's name right away when they are born. How do you do that? Don't you feel like you have to take time to know the baby first to see which name fits them best? Suddenly, I could see how, from just shifting my perspective, my cultural framework, and what had seemed like the most loving, kind response to me actually seemed the opposite to someone from another culture. And how they were demonstrating love by a tradition that I had viewed as unloving. Focusing on the commonalities rather than the differences will help us connect and find ways to see past the obstacles of different viewpoints that can lead us to hasty judgment and misunderstandings. Number 3, reflect on what you have learned. No single class or even course can educate you about serving cross-culturally. It's similar to learning a language. It takes years to build expertise. However, we can adjust our mindset to maximize our learning capability and grow from the experiences we have, both in other cultures overseas, but also interacting with those from other cultures here in the U.S. An important component of this process is reflection. Ask yourself questions like, what parts of this culture do I find the most confusing? What makes me personally uncomfortable? What aspects of this culture do I find appealing and why? What kinds of questions could I ask to gain a better understanding of the people I am working with? A paper written by 2 psychologists in 1999 called Unskilled and Unaware of It has become widely known as a way to describe a common cognitive bias. And unfortunately, the concept applies all too well to how we tend to learn new cultures. The Dunning-Kruger effect describes how we tend to overestimate our knowledge in an area that is new for us, and our ignorance is a double burden. Not only do we not understand, but we lack even the knowledge to be aware of our own ignorance in this new area. The horizontal line across the bottom of the image displays one's knowledge or expertise in a given area. In our case, it might be the culture of a new country that we are visiting for the first time. The vertical line on the left demonstrates our confidence level as we learn. The visual demonstrates that new learners often begin with high levels of confidence in an area where they're just beginning to learn, but the more they read, the more they discover, the more they realize that there's much more to learn and they are only a novice. That first peak, the one often dubbed Mount Stupid, can be a place we visit if we make a quick trip to a country and begin to assign sweeping judgments. Well, in Peru, they always do this, or Tanzanians are this way, or the Romanian church is like this. We might speak with confidence about a culture where we have very limited understanding and would take years and years for us to learn well. A large part of being culturally agile is a better understanding of our lack of knowledge and knowing how to tread lightly instead of blundering ahead with misplaced confidence. We realize that we have in 1 week experienced only a tiny fraction of all there is to know about a culture. So we process and share those experiences carefully and with mindfulness that they may vary greatly, and there is much, much more to learn. Every single day, no matter where you live and work, chances are you are interacting with people who are very different from you. The lessons the Lord teaches us through cross-cultural ministry have applications in our family, our church, our workplace, and our community. He is stretching us and growing us through the diversity of His image bearers. This is a beautiful opportunity that we have. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any follow-up questions about working cross-culturally, please email me, Christine@medical-outreach.com.